In North America, call toll-free 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
A tremendous Monday to each and every one of you. Thanks so much for starting your week off with EWTN's Open Line. If you'd like to be part of the program, we'd love to have you. The number's 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. If you're outside the United States and Canada, we've got a number for you. That's 1-205-271-2985. And we'll even put you straight to the front of the line at 1-205-271-2985. You can always send us an email, openline@EWTN.com. That's openline@EWTN.com. And the email folder is a little thin for EWTN's Open Line Monday. So we would welcome any phone call or any emails that you might want to send with your questions for our Monday host, Father John Trigilio. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook Live, you can type a question into the chat window, and it may find its way to us by the end of the program. I'm Jack Williams, Michael McCall producing the program. Your call screener is Matt Gubensky, and Jeff Burson is handling those social media efforts. And he is efforting especially hard to keep a firm lasso cyberly onto Father John Trigilio, our host. How are you?
Fine. I'm doing okay.
Could you ask Father Ken to pay the cable bill, please? We're having a hard time lassoing you in here, but we'll see how far we make it.
Okay. You can at least hear me though, right?
Yep, I can hear you. We can see you. So that's. It's we couldn't ask for more at this moment other than for this moment to be repeated for about 59 more moments. We have an email from Mike, and he says, Dear Father Trigilio, if during Mass the priest doesn't hold the chalice or at least have his hand touching it while pronouncing the words of consecration, would the wine actually become the precious blood, and would there be a valid Mass?
Yes, he should hold it, but it doesn't affect the validity, because as long as he's intending to consecrate the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ, and he says those exact words, then him not touching the chalice or the paten or the host would not affect the validity. But for it to be licit, he would need to do that. So, and of course, someone should point this out to the priest that he's not doing what he's supposed to do, but it would be a valid Mass and valid Holy Eucharist.
Have you ever had anybody approach you with potential liturgical abuses on their mind?
Not from me, but I get a lot of emails from people who, and sadly, it's not necessarily the priest's fault. He had bad training. I mean, at Mount St. Mary's, we make sure we go over all the sacraments, the rituals, the rubrics of the Missal, but some places, they're a little deficient, and so it could be that, or the priest could just be very lax, or worst case scenario, he doesn't care, he wants to, do his own thing, and those are the most grievous offenses.
I had a priest once give some advice in this area that I thought was very prudent, and I've always remembered it, and he said that there certainly are people in the world that have axes to grind against one thing or another and maybe have defiant natures to begin with. But in these matters, it would be really charitable to not assume that your priest is one of those people. And this is one of those areas. And you might just ask him, if you don't understand something, don't accuse him of engaging in liturgical abuse, but rather ask him, why did you do this, that, or the other thing? And then at least you'll know where you're coming from when you start to have the discussion, huh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, ask the priest, and you don't want to sort of challenge him in front of all the other parishioners outside of church, but make an appointment, see him, because sometimes the guy just needs to be reminded or pointed out or give him opportunity to explain himself. And you might be doing a great act of charity in doing that. But again, you want to always use fraternal correction with charity.
And, depending upon the situation, you might find out that you're not the liturgical scholar that you were, huh?
Yeah, you might find out that like I had somebody correct, not a friend of mine, but he was using the 1917 Code of Canon Law, and my friend had to point out, and we're under the 83 code, so that superseded it.
Oh, goodness. So we got some open lines for you and plenty of time for your phone calls at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Emily would like to know, she says she's a new Catholic and she's looking for some information on what exactly a Marian devotion entails. Can you help her?
Well, Marian devotion obviously is very distinct and separate from adoration and worship, which belong exclusively to God. That's the first commandment, no other gods. But Marian devotion is honoring Mary because she's the mother of Jesus, and she's our spiritual mother because he gave her to us at the foot of the cross when he said, "Behold thy mother." So Marian devotion is this filial devotion that we have to Mary as our spiritual mother. She doesn't replace Jesus, but she is the intercessor par excellence who then goes directly to her son. And obviously, Jesus wants this to happen. He allowed her to bring it to his attention at the wedding feast of Cana that they have no more wine. And he could have figured that out on his own because he's had a divine intellect. But her participation in that allows us then to give her that wonderful devotion, which is not adoration. And basically, it's just having this true devotion to Our Lady. St. Alphonsus de Liguori wrote a beautiful book on that.
All right. You need to put on your, did Father Benedict Rochelle leave you a psychology beretta to put on in situations? Nathan,
he gave me a hood.
There you go. Nathan writes in, is anxiety a spiritual thing that we can control or something else?
Oh, well, that's a good one. There is a psychological condition of anxiety, which can be treated with therapy and sometimes with medication. And then there's a spiritual anxiety, which is similar, but is caused from a spiritual source, either a person's weakness in their spiritual life, or it's an attack from the devil. So we do make that distinction, and sometimes there's overlap because Father Dennis McManus, who taught at our seminary at one time, was expert in battles with the devil, made it clear that people who do have some psychological challenges are ripe for being also tempted by the devil. But anybody and everybody, even the devil had the hubris to tempt Jesus in the desert. So he's not just going to pick on those people that are easier to influence. But yes, there is a spiritual anxiety. We see this in someone who's got scrupulosity. They're always fearful that their sins are not forgiven, and they have to that's a strong battle they are engaged in. Then you've got the psychological anxiety, where someone might, like I said, need some professional treatment.
All right, you can put your psychologist beretta away and get out your fashion beretta. Cheryl would like to know if wearing nice shorts to Mass during the week is permissible.
It depends on your pastor. I, as a pastor, would put a big sign in the vestibule of the church: please dress modestly. And I would let people decide for themselves what is modest, but there will always be times where people would come in, their shorts were a little bit too short, or they were not appropriate. Okay, they were not loose fitting. We could put it that way. And there's where the priest can make announcements, not necessarily from the pulpit because you don't want to embarrass somebody, but you can say in the bulletin or put a sign up that says, please remember that this isn't just for your comfort, but you also don't want to be a distraction to people at Mass. And I know, like in Italy and at the Mother Angelica shrine, you're not allowed to wear shorts. They have some trousers you can put on, or a dress to cover things over. So, people get bummed out here in the United States. You go traveling other than Hansville, you go to Italy, they won't let you in if you're wearing shorts or open sleeves. They are very strict. We're not as here in the United States for most places, but again, you might think it's okay. Ask somebody, someone that you respect their opinion.
833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. Plenty of open phone lines and a lot of time for your calls at 833-288-3986. It's Open Line Monday with Father John Trigilio.
Here's today's quote from Mother Angelica's perpetual calendar. There are a lot of things that you can do, but you've got to do what God has asked you to do and stick to it. You have all eternity to experience the presence of God, but you have a very short time to do something for Him. Mother's spiral-bound perpetual calendar features an inspirational message for each day of the year. It's available from the EWTN Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Christ is the answer with Father John Riccardo.
Here's the new challenge. At least 1 hour a week in front of the Blessed Sacrament, with the goal of an hour a day in front of the Blessed Sacrament. I had a guy come up to me and he says, Father, I'm doing a lot of things. I'm in a men's fellowship. I pray with my wife every day. I go to Mass every Sunday and usually a couple times during the week. I read Scripture. He goes, I want more. I said, do you pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament? He said, outside of Mass, no. I said, I think that's the more. See, all these saints, these are the ones who surround us. These are the ones who ran before us. These are the ones who fought well, who kept the faith. They would tell you, as would every single saint in heaven right now, you cannot run this race if you don't spend time with the Master. Whatever else we're doing, it's second, third, and fourth. First things need to be first. And the first thing is to be with the Master. And the Master is Jesus.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question, call 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. Or send us an email to openline@EWTN.com.
EWTN Religious Catalog is your online destination for gifts and holy reminders. You can buy Catholic by shopping EWTNRC.com today. And you can receive regular emails from EWTN's Religious Catalog. Just visit EWTN.com and click on subscribe. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. You can get in right now at 833-288-3986. First up today is Jim in the great state of Missouri, listening on Sirius XM Channel 130. Jim, you're on with Father Trigilio.
Hey, everyone. So the Supreme Court big news, of course, about the possible overturning abortion, got me thinking about the old Jewish tradition is that abortion was permissible as long as I understood it, as long as it benefited the mother. But at one point, did the Catholic Church or the post-Jewish, Christian Church consider that abortion actually is wrong based on the fact that the baby is a human at conception? Can you try to explain that to me, how it changed from Jewish tradition and became something more defined?
Okay, well, I think we can have evidence going back to the Church Fathers and even to the Didache, which condemned abortion. And, certainly the celebration of the feast of Jesus's conception and his mother, all right, the feast of the Incarnation, March 25th, which was nine months before his birthday on December 25th, shows that the Church early on had this respect for the fact that at the moment of conception, now it may not have been solemnly taught with the exact precision that we have today. But certainly in the early church, going back to even the time of the church fathers, and I would say even the apostles, that they understood that life did begin at the moment of conception. However, that was understood. Now, it's true there was a debate among some of the ancient philosophers on when did life begin, and even some medieval theologians and philosophers were discussing, at what moment was the immortal soul created and implanted, and the church did not make a solemn definition until later. But you going back to apostolic and patristic times, we see that this understanding that human life is sacred not just after physical birth, but even during the stages. And so as soon as the soul is created, that was always the understanding that that's a human being. And now we know through science and medicine that, the DNA that exists within the mother at the moment of conception is distinct from her own. Up until the point of the fertilization of the egg, that's all her. But once the egg is fertilized, then that embryo, that human being is now her child, and it's distinct. So that's the teaching of the church. And I would say the Hebrew, I think some of the Midrash or the Talmud, these are writings of the Hebrew scholars, but of course they don't have a magisterium like we do in the church. And so you could always find some disagreement among some of the Hebrew teachers of the law, but I think among Christianity, especially Catholic Christianity, it's been consistent from the very beginning.
How's that, Jim?
I was just wondering on the old where it kind of changed from the Jewish tradition to being more universally recognized. It sounds like maybe it was just along with science also.
Yeah, I would think so, because part of the problem is in the ancient philosophy, like Aristotle and Plato, people didn't have the same, not just in terms of technology, but doing, say, autopsies and examining the parts of the human body on the inside. That didn't become more prevalent until later, around the time of Christianity. And so a lot of it was guesswork and speculation. And, out of respect for the human body, there were times where they discouraged the examination, say, of dead people. But that gradually changed. But I think the teaching that human life begins at the moment of ensoulment, when the soul is created, was always present. It was just when exactly did the soul was it created? And I think we see, again, that's why abortion was always condemned. There was never a time in Christian history that abortion was permitted or tolerated. The question was, at what point was the soul created? And now we understand that's certainly at the moment of conception.
833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number, 833-288-3986. Next up is Julie in San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Julie, you're on with Father John.
Oh, hi, Father John.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so going back to the first question you had, the caller you had, he wanted to know if the Mass was valid if the priest did not have his hand on the chalice. And you answered that as long as he had the intention and as long as he said the proper words, that it was valid. So my question is, what if there's a bad priest? He's been overtaken by Satan, and he doesn't have the intention. He does it, but he doesn't intend it. Is that valid? And then another two quick follow-up questions. Is it liturgical abuse to not follow the rubrics of the Mass and to hold at the moment of elevation, to elevate the host with just your right hand and then the chalice with just your left hand, to be different and to draw attention to yourself? Is that liturgical abuse?
Okay. The Council of Trent made it very clear that the priest must intend to do what the church does. It's not required for validity that he intends what the church intends. We have to intend to do what the church does. So if the priest is celebrating Mass, even if he's personally in mortal sin, God forbid, that's a sacrilege, but it's still valid. If he's a heretic, it's still valid, because as long as he's intending to do what the church does, and it's obviously implied by the fact that he's celebrating the Mass, that's the guarantee that we have as members of the members of the church, that Mass is real and that the transubstantiation takes place, and you've got the real presence of the Holy Eucharist under the appearances of bread and wine. So whether or not the priest touches the chalice or the paten or the host is not required for validity. And likewise, if he violates the rubrics, as long as it's not required for validity, like he has to use grape wine and wheat bread and say the exact words, "This is my body, and this is my blood." If he does any other aberration of the rubrics, it may not be invalid, but it certainly be illicit, and it would be liturgical abuse. So to leave things out, like when priests, don't want to wash their fingers during the Mass, if they leave parts out of the Eucharistic prayer or whatever, any shortcuts they may have or innovations that are not strictly in the text. And so again, we go back to the ancient axiom, say the black and do the red. This isn't my Mass, this is the Mass of Jesus Christ. And so I as a priest must follow that precisely. Now, whether the priest elevates the host and the chalice with both his hands, again, it's not required for validity, and you might have some disagreement on whether or not it's illicit. It's certainly not how we teach them in the seminary. Okay, we want people to, and again, it's you have more stability as when you have both hands to elevate the chalice and the hold the sacred host. But I've seen priests do it with one hand. It's not the preferred method, but I wouldn't say that was necessarily a liturgical abuse. It's just something that's imprudent.
Next up, she's in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania today, listening on Sirius XM Channel 130. Cindy, you're on with Father John.
Hi, Father John. I would appreciate it if you could give me a little more clarity on the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Okay. Well, devotion to the Sacred Heart, certainly, we have people like St. Gertrude and St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, but they're only two of many. Devotion to the Sacred Heart surrounds itself around the fact that Jesus' heart was pierced with the spear of Longinus as he died on Good Friday. And from that Sacred Heart flowed blood and water. We see this, in not just in crucifixes, but certainly in the image of divine mercy, where from Jesus' heart there's a white ray of light, and then there's a red. And that again symbolizes the blood and the water. The water is symbolic of baptism, the red symbolic of the precious blood that we receive at Mass. And so going back to ancient times, again, I know when I was in the high school seminary, there was some professor was trying to tell us that, in ancient times, people believed that emotions resided in the organ of the heart, and now we know it's in the brain. And so he was trying to tell us that on Valentine's Day you should send a card with a brain on it rather than a heart. Well, the organ of your heart obviously doesn't think, but it's what the heart represents. We talk about heartache. Okay, you broke my heart. Someone is in love with someone. They say, you're my heart's desire. It's an analogy which we still use, just like sunrise and sunset. We're not saying that we believe that the Earth is the center of the solar system anymore, like we did before. It's just a figure of speech. But the image of the Sacred Heart, that it was pierced, and obviously in Sacred Art, not only do you have the marking of the spear, but also you've got the crown of thorns wrapped around the heart of Jesus. Again, it's a depiction that helps us in our devotion. And so you think of all the things that the heart of Jesus, not just physically, but also because it represents emotionally what Jesus felt for us, that he loved us unto death. So even though, yes, he had a physical brain in his sacred humanity, putting a brain, on an image or a statue, it's not going to have the same effect as seeing Jesus' heart. I remember when I was a parochial vicar at Seven Sorrows in Middletown, Diocese of Harrisburg, there was a parishioner I brought communion, and their neighbor had a statue of the Sacred Heart, but their neighbor wasn't Catholic, and Jesus was pointing to his Sacred Heart, but because they weren't Catholic, they had his sand blown off. So he's just pointing to his chest.
Wow.
And I said, that's kind of odd.
Very strange. Wow. Cindy, thank you so much for your call. Tom Price here. Jack had to step away, so I'm going to finish out the hour with Father John Trigilio. We do have a couple of lines open for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Open Line Monday with Father John Trigilio in progress here on EWTN. Do give us a call.
I'm Doug Keck. This is an EWTN Bookmark Brief, speaking with Father Gerald E. Murray, who, along with Diane Montagna, wrote the book Calming the Storm, Navigating the Crises in the Catholic Church and in Society, available through our EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. Now, you talk about crises in this book. What are some of the crises you deal with in this book, Father?
We basically look at both the crises of faith and then the crises of human reason, because in many ways, the problems in the church and society are based on a loss of truth and the triumph of relativism, you know, the dictatorship of relativism that Pope Benedict spoke about. So we try to get people to say, turn to the Lord and have confidence in the truth of what he taught.
Calming the Storm, Navigating the Crises in the Catholic Church and in Society, available through our EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, all things Catholic. This has been an EWTN Bookmark Brief. Highly recommend this book. Check it out. See you next time.
This is Jack Williams. If you missed any part of today's show, catch the encore tonight at 10 Eastern. And check out the podcast anytime at EWTNradio.net and click podcasts.
EWTN is everywhere. EWTN radio programming is provided free of charge to over 500 domestic and international AM and FM radio stations. It's a great teaching tool for Catholics and non-Catholics alike. For a complete list of EWTN AM and FM stations across America, visit EWTNradio.net. At the bottom of the page, click Affiliates. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Tomorrow on More to Life, the life you were meant to live.
We'll look at how the theology of the body can help you live a more abundant life.
That's tomorrow on More to Life, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central on EWTN Radio.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hey, glad to have you along for the ride here on EWTN's Open Line Monday with Father John Trigilio. We do have a couple of lines open for you at the moment. 833-288-EWTN. If you have a question for Father John, 833-288-3986. Let's go to Matthew now in Fort Wayne, listening on the Great Redeemer Radio. Hey there, Matthew. What's on your mind today?
I just recently went to confession, and I feel like I'm always rushed out, and it doesn't make me want to go. And I know we have to go, being Catholic, once every year at a minimum. But I'll tell you, when I go there, I feel like I'm going to be lambasted.
Well, I'm very sorry for that, and the priest, should never ever, push you out or rush you out. I do know when I was a pastor for 16 years, one of the things you always kept in the back of your mind, however, is if you're the only priest there and you're hearing confessions, say I had confessions on Saturday from like 3 to 4, and then 4 o'clock was Mass. Mm-hmm. If there were 20 or 30 people waiting in line to go to confession, you try to get as many as possible, because you don't know how many of those people are in mortal sin. They want to be able to go to communion, and God forbid, if they died, you'd want to be able to go to heaven. Sure. So that's in the back of my mind. But certainly, if you feel in any way, shape, or form the priest is rushing you, I would go to another priest. Don't, it's like if you find a doctor you don't like their bedside manner, find another one. Yeah. Don't punish yourself just because the priest is too hasty or even rude. Your soul is more important than that.
Matthew, thank you so much for your call. We have a line open for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Father, here's a question from Pietro. He says, I have heard the statement, quote, Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of the Father. What does that mean?
Okay, well, the term Lord, Master, Dominus, means that he has dominion, he has authority. And as the Son, he receives that authority from the Father. But we also have to remember metaphysically, ontologically, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they're three persons and one God. They're all equal. They share the same divine intellect, the same divine will. But in our human minds, we have to use what we call appropriation, where we assign to each person a different act, although all three are always operational. So, for instance, we say God the Father created, God the Son redeemed, God the Holy Spirit sanctifies, but all three are at work. So Jesus is Lord because the Father is Lord, and so is the Holy Spirit. It's just that we ascribe to Jesus that particular title. Jesus is my Lord and my all.
Very good. It's an open line Monday with Father John Trigilio here on EWTN Radio. Going now to Walter in New York, listening on YouTube. Hey, Walter, what's on your mind today?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Father.
Hello.
I have a question concerning, yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Go right ahead.
Sure. I have a question concerning the angels. Now, before Christ, the resurrection or the incarnation, did the angels' purposes change? Did their purpose change? Whether it be the dark angels that fell or the good angels, did their purpose change after Christ? For instance, were there guardian angels prior to Jesus coming?
Okay.
That's a good question. Yes, the angels, the ones who were righteous, the 2/3 who went to heaven, their function has always been the same. They're messengers, or like in the highest of the choirs, the seraphim, they just praise and adore God morning, noon, and night constantly. The fallen angels, once they disobeyed, that was like 1/3 of them, when they went against God and they were cast into hell. They were there well before the creation of mankind. So before Adam and Eve were even created, the angels and the fallen angels had their jobs sort of established, and Jesus even refers to guardian angels. So we believe that there were guardian angels well in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. We even see Abraham and other figures in the Old Testament being greeted by angels. So yes, their sort of their job and their job assignment pre-existed the coming of Christ.
All right. And we thank you so much for your call, Walter. It's Open Line Monday with Father John here on EWTN. Fascinating question here, Father, from Arnold, who says, I am a Buddhist and I don't understand hell. Am I going there as a Buddhist? Is it there just to scare people to be virtuous?
Well, it's more than just a scare. It's like I have Italian relatives, and they're some of them are a little superstitious.
Okay.
They won't use the word cancer because they think if you say it means someone's going to get it. So my aunts would talk about the C word.
Oh, wow.
Hell is more than just a concept. It's a reality. And hell is the absence of God. And that's the worst state anyone could be in. Now, hell was created for the devil and the fallen angels, but human beings can also go there. And it's a place you want to avoid at all costs. Just like if you were going to the doctor and the doctor said, okay, you got a tumor here. It's either malignant or benign. If it's malignant, you want it taken care of right away. You want it removed, or radiation or chemo. In the same way with mortal sin, it opens the possibility of someone being denied the beatific vision. And that's what hell is, utter isolation from God and everyone else. And because it's real, we want people to not just be afraid of it, we want them to avoid it. We want them to long for heaven. So as a Buddhist, if you were born and raised in the Buddhist religion, the Lord wants you to look at what has been revealed, because Buddha and some of the other founders of religion, none of them died and on the third day rose from the dead. Jesus did that. Yeah. Jesus is the revelation of God the Father. So I encourage you to read more about Christianity, Catholic Christianity in particular, and even look at maybe our book, Catholicism for Dummies, and just see, does it make some sense? Does it, answer some questions? Because, you're responsible for what you know, but what also you could have known, but whatever reason you didn't look into.
And I can certainly endorse that wonderful book of yours, Catholicism for Dummies. Whether or not I'm a dummy, I don't know. You'd have to ask. You'd have to ask my wife about that. But I can tell you this: that book is fantastic and really answered a lot of my questions. So good stuff there. And thank you so much for your question there, Arnold. Let's go now to Deb, a first-time caller in Hampton, Virginia, listening on Sirius XM, channel 130. Deb, what's on your mind today?
Hi there. I just had a real simple question that I didn't know the answer to when my convert husband asked me, which is, what side was Jesus pierced on, the left or the right? Because we've seen it both, or not twice, but some crucifixes had it on the left and some crucifixes had it on the right. I'm like, I don't know. Okay.
Well, I think, when you look at crucifixes or statues of Jesus being crucified, the more common one is that it's on his right side. That doesn't mean that, if you have a picture or a statue of him being pierced on the left side, that it's wrong. I think if you look at the Shroud of Turin, I think that indicates it was on the right side. But again, even the Shroud of Turin is not an article of faith. Mm-hmm. So you can say it's part of private revelation, even though I believe it's real. It's like any Marian apparition. So what we do know is Jesus was pierced in his Sacred Heart, and whether it's the left or the right, I personally think it was on the right side. But if some medical person could say, no, it was on this side, okay, it's not going to destroy my faith, all right?
Very good. All right. Good to know that. Deb, thanks so much for your call. Jim asks this question: when we die, we will go to heaven, hell, or purgatory. Well, if we're already in heaven, why would we be judged again during the second coming? How does that work?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It's not an appeal. It's not going to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
What happens is at the particular judgment when you die determines where you go. The general judgment is merely a ratification of all the previous judgments, so that everyone in heaven knows why these other people are in heaven and why those who went to hell went to hell. So it's merely a ratification, and maybe not an explanation is a good word, but a manifestation of all the prior particular judgments.
Jim, thanks so much for your question. Let's go to Jeff now in Dallas, listening on Sirius XM, channel 130. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today, sir?
Hey, how you doing? My question is dovetailing on the one about conception before in the soul. How did the church actually determine, how does the church determine that the soul is created at the moment of conception rather than the soul already being in heaven and then coming down into the body at conception?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Obviously, someone like Plato, who was a Greek pagan philosopher, he believed in a world of universals where would sort of be akin to or have affinity for this idea of pre-existence of the soul. Aristotle, however, and obviously we know St. Thomas Aquinas used him a lot in his Summa Theologica, but going back again to the fathers of the church, the belief was that the human soul is created at the same moment that the body is created. Because if all these souls are in heaven, you can't leave heaven. Once you're in heaven, you're there for all eternity. That's why the angels were created outside of heaven, and then they were put to a test. The good ones went to heaven, the bad ones went to hell. If a human being's existing prior to their conception, well, if they're in heaven, you can't leave. So the church concludes then that the soul must be created at the moment of the body's being created. And so it's at conception that the physical body of the embryo, the zygote, whatever you want to use scientifically, all happens simultaneously.
Okay.
And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So Mary is conceived Jesus at the moment of the Annunciation, and within 3 days she goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth. Elizabeth, 6 months pregnant. John the Baptist is leaping for joy. Jesus is truly present within Mary, not months later, but just a few days at the most.
Jeff, thank you so much for your call. It is Open Line Monday with Father John Trigilio here on EWTN Radio. Got a great show for you cooked up tomorrow for Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. That'll be at noon Eastern. Great topic here. How far back do you and your spouse go? I have to think about that from my own sweet wife. We were friends for years before the idea of dating even popped up, and that seemed to work out pretty well for us. Take Two with Jerry and Debbie tomorrow at noon Eastern on EWTN Radio. Let's go to Mary now, a first-time caller in Atlanta, listening on our great station there, The Quest. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind today?
Hey, hi, I'm 81 years old. I've been a Catholic all my life, and for the first time, I thought about this question in the last year or two. If Adam and Eve had two sons, I think Cain and Abel, how was the world procreated?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that, because I got that my first month as a priest.
Really?
I was teaching in the Catholic grade school, and the kiddies asked me, how does the whole human race? The Bible, Genesis, does not explain, like a biology book, exactly all the sequences of creation. What Genesis teaches us is that God is the creator, and certainly, we learn that that the human race flows from Adam and Eve. Pope Pius XII, through Humani Generis in the 1950s, affirms this as Catholic teaching. It's called monogenism, that the human race comes from one set of parents, as opposed to polygenism, where it comes from several. And two British scientists in the 80s discovered the reality, or they found evidence that through mitochondrial DNA, all human beings can be traced to one woman. And when they issued this result, someone in the press then coined the word Eve from Genesis, but the two scientists were agnostics. They didn't use that word, but they affirmed what we always believed in faith, is that we came from Now, how do you get from Adam and Eve to everybody? We don't know. Just like, when Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel. Well, now there's only three people, Adam, Eve, and Cain. Where does Cain find his wife? He marries someone, okay, and starts his own lineage. Then they have another kid named Seth. The Bible has a lot of unanswered questions. That doesn't mean it contradicts reality. It just means that these are purviews of science and medicine, and in terms of faith and theology, we go for the ultimate answer, that God is the creator. But the in-between stuff, the details, the stuff that is of mathematics and physics and chemistry, that's all proper to another discipline.
Okay, Mary, thank you so much for your call. Pamela has a question about purgatory. Is purgatory derived from the book of Maccabees? And why does the church teach to pray for the souls in purgatory?
Okay, yes, Maccabees is one of several biblical supports for purgatory, but Maccabees is one of the clearest ones, even though they don't use the word purgatory. The soldiers who died, after they were dead, they prayed for them. So if they're in heaven, they don't need any prayers. If they're in hell, prayers won't do any good. So there must be something in between heaven and hell in which prayers would be efficacious. And so the church has always prayed for the dead in terms of the temporal punishment due to sin that was not expiated in life. So again, if the soul's in hell, nothing can help them. If they're in heaven, they don't need any help. But there must be a period of a state of cleansing. That's where they got the word purgatory from, purgatus, meaning to be cleansed. So our prayers somehow, some way, can help in that alleviation of that punishment due to sin.
Very good. Pamela, thank you for your email. By the way, if you'd like to send us an email for a future show, the address is openline@ewtn.com, openline@ewtn.com. Be sure you put Father John in the subject line or Monday in the subject line so we can do a little mixing and matching, get the right question to the right host. Gilbert has a tough question here. What is the Catholic Church's stance on suicide, Father?
Yes, the Church is against suicide for various reasons. And certainly when someone commits suicide, We have a greater appreciation for the fact that a lot of people are suffering from different kinds of depression, whether it's clinical or not. So unlike in olden times where if a person committed suicide, they were excommunicated, they weren't allowed to have a Catholic burial, we no longer impose those penalties because the church's understanding is that suicide is still wrong. It's a sin, but the people who commit it, a lot of them don't have the full culpability because this might be a mental illness, it might be extreme stress, so we're not condoning it, okay? It's a form of self-euthanasia. Just like euthanasia is wrong for someone to kill someone, it's wrong for you to kill yourself. But again, I've known a lot of people. I've known a priest who committed suicide, and it was a very strong case of the worst type of clinical depression. And so we were confident that he wasn't going to be roasting in hell for that. But you pray for the family who has to endure that loss, and yes, you pray for the soul because that maybe they're in purgatory.
Sure. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for your question. Here's one now from Lisa, who's watching us this afternoon on Facebook. Lisa says, Father, my niece is getting married by her brother-in-law who got his, quote, ordination off the internet. Oh, boy. None of the parties involved are Catholic, but being a devout Catholic myself, it seems to desecrate the sanctity of marriage. Would I be sending the message that I approve if I attend the ceremony? Any advice you have would be very helpful. Thank you and God bless. That's from Lisa.
And what was her relationship?
This is her niece.
Her niece, yeah. I would say don't go only under the most dire circumstances would I advise someone to go if there was like their son or daughter or brother or sister, and the consequence would be they never speak to you again. But you have to express to them your disappointment. You go, but don't have any big smile on your face, no wedding present. But normally speaking, this is a further extension of a familial relation. Don't go, but let them know why you're not going, because this is not a sacramental. Now, if they're not Catholic, okay, and this is their first marriage, as long as it's legal in the eyes of the state, it would be considered a valid marriage. Catholics and Eastern Orthodox must be married by a priest or deacon, but if they're non-Catholic Christians, we accept that as a valid marriage. But I would say, you, as a Catholic, you don't want to give the wrong message either.
Right. Lisa, thank you so much for your call, your question there via Facebook this afternoon. Here's one from Lucas. If you don't have something to confess, should you still go to confession?
Yes.
Okay.
and I'm just reminded that poor gentleman who was on earlier in our show today, and the priest was kind of pushing him out, moving him along too quickly. You can make a devotional confession where you just mention the venial sins you've committed, or just say, I want the grace of the sacrament. But remember, confession is not spiritual direction. So you're not there to talk about your overall spirituality. You're there. It's almost like the ER. When you go to the ER, they want to know, where does it hurt? Where are you bleeding? Okay. And when you go to the GP, your general practitioner, then you've got a time to look over your triglycerides and your all your glucosides and everything else.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Joe is listening to us in Spokane on the great Sacred Heart Radio. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Hi there. Thanks for taking the call. I'm not a Catholic, so this is going to be kind of a weird question, but I listen to you guys all the time, and I appreciate the at least doctrinal soundness and thoughtfulness of the answers. So here goes. I've got a friend. He's a long-time happy marriage, not a Catholic. His wife is intent upon being confirmed and joining the Catholic Church. He's against this, and I'm just curious as to hear the Catholic teaching, if there is such a thing, on whether or not she should defer to the headship of her husband in this matter, or it's more important in the Church's view to get right with the Catholic Church.
Okay,
well, that's it's interesting, but I would say not an extremely rare situation. Her spiritual betterment is always paramount, and normally speaking, she should have deference to her husband because she did promise that relationship. But likewise, if her husband were to ask her to do something that was immoral or wrong, she'd have to say no. If the Holy Spirit is leading her in this direction and she says no, that would be wrong too in the eyes of God. So even though her husband doesn't have malicious intent, she doesn't have to obey him with blind obedience. Okay, under normal circumstances she should, but just like she can't do something wrong, if this is the path that God is leading her towards, only she's obligated. She's not saying he has to become Catholic,
Right.
or that he has to start going to church with her. So I would say she needs to do it in a way that's charitable, but also as a husband, he needs to support her.
Yeah, Dr. David Anders has tackled this question a number of times on the Call to Communion program, and he often says, well, you can always refer to your conscience and just say, look, my conscience is telling me that this is something that I really need to do, and so I have to follow my conscience. So that
And if he really loves her, he's not going to say, oh, well, I demand you do this. He's going to say, honey, if this is what you feel you need to do, I'm going to support you.
One would hope so. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for your call today. And Patricia says, how do we define grace? Someone told me we merit grace, but we also receive initial grace free of merit. So what are the different kinds of grace, and where are some places we can find them in the Bible?
Well, certainly we make a distinction between uncreated grace, which is the indwelling of the Holy Trinity that takes place at baptism. And then God has created grace, which is a gift, from the word gratia, which means gift. So no one really merits grace. It's a gift from God. Sanctifying grace makes us holy, makes us a child of God. We receive that in baptism, but also in the other sacraments, particularly when you go to communion, and also when you go to confession and you have a mortal sin, sanctifying grace is restored. Actual grace is a grace that is given to us to help us do good things. So any good that we do actually can only take place because God has given us the grace to do it.
Yeah.
It's like the battery in that little Energizer bunny rabbit. Without grace, without the batteries, he can't do anything.
Yeah.
And without grace, we can't do any good. So you don't merit grace, but the more grace you accept and cooperate, the more you're able to receive.
Very good. Patricia, thanks for your question. We'll close out with this one from Georgia. If you believe in God but not Jesus, can you still go to heaven?
You can go to heaven if you don't know that Jesus is the Son of God and the second person of the Trinity. If it's through no fault of your own. However, if you know this and you reject it, you are liable for that bad judgment. But if you don't know, or it's not your fault, you don't know, okay, then that we call invincible ignorance. But once you start asking the questions, you need to find out what the answers are.
All right, very good. We want to thank everybody for all their phone calls today, all of your emails, your texts, your questions via YouTube and Facebook. It's been a fantastic ride. Glad to be here to finish up the program for Jack Williams. Father, could you leave us with your blessing, please?
Absolutely. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Father. Appreciate you as always. Don't forget tomorrow at this same time, it'll be Father Wade Menezes taking your calls here on Open Line Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, of course, Father Mitch Pacwa, along with all sorts of great questions and things from the Bible, teachings of the church. And on Thursday, we roll on with Father Brian Milady, and then on Friday we wrap things up with Colin Donovan answering all your theological questions. On behalf of